to meet many of you virtually, and thanks for joining this presentation around R3. So we're going to discuss a little bit firstly about our venture development program, and then Iryna and team are going to talk to you a little bit more about the Corda developers section and how we help make that journey much smoother and a better experience. So firstly, by way of introduction, the R3 venture development program is the gateway for early stage blockchain startups into the R3 ecosystem. So think of us akin to an equity-free accelerator incubator. We really help to accelerate your time to production and help go to market faster and more effectively with enterprises. So if we move on to the next slide, please. We're going to give you a quick overview really of why so many startups are choosing Corda and how that growth of that ecosystem is. And there's a number of factors driving that. Probably the most important and well-known one is R3's blockchain ecosystem. So we lead the world's largest blockchain ecosystem with over 350 industry participants. That's really a combination of enterprise customers, of consortia, of tech partners, and of course, independent software vendors. Now, the blockchain that we use, Corda, our platform, is enterprise grade ready, and more importantly, also backed by the federal government. So this is very few DLT technologies have that backing, and it's why so many startups, especially who are selling into regulated industries and into enterprises, choose it. Then I'll talk a bit more about this, the venture development program itself. As I said, think of us as akin to an accelerator incubator, so really helping support your growth journey. And another point here is our global VC and startup investor network. Of course, in order to be able to start and build your product, and then in order to be able to deploy it, fundraising is a key part, and that never really ends as a startup. So this is again something where the power of our ecosystem comes in. Now, if you move please to the next slide, Iryna, and I'll talk a little bit about the technical advantages from a high level overview, and Iryna is going to give you a little bit more about Corda in the technical side. But Corda is very different to traditional blockchains. We really formed in R3, ideating on the idea of how can we make a concept like blockchain usable to enterprises, particularly within the financial services sector. How can a series of entities interact privately and directly together, be able to transact and share value, but on a need-to-know basis without broadcasting? And this is really core to what we do. So privacy, security, and scalability are at the heart of what we do. We don't broadcast the transactions out there to the entire network and reach consensus like this. Only the parties that need to be involved are involved, and consensus is reached between the two of them. So this, as you can imagine, gives greater flexibility in terms of a scalability and usability in terms of enterprise, and that's why so many use it. And the final point to mention is the interoperability. Unlike other blockchains, our top-of-stack applications, Corda apps, are meant to interoperate. In fact, we have a public Corda network where such an operation happens. The idea is that we'd like this connection to happen. We'd like to see growth in the ecosystem. We'd like to see point-to-point connections where necessary and where needed. And this is specifically built into Corda's functionality. There's no siloed assets. Everyone can interact with each other as a function of their business model. So if we move on to the next slide, please, we can see a little bit more about the customer ecosystem. So the third reason why so many startups use Corda is the ecosystem. And of course, that's very much where the customers come from for startups. And this is just a small selection. We, of course, started as a consortium around financial enterprises, moved towards insurance and trade finance. But really, this gives you the breadth of our offering. We're prevalent across all industries, and really anywhere where enterprises are transacting, you'll see us involved. In more and more consortia, there's becoming a consensus that parties do need to share information, but they do need to know who they're transacting with, and they do need to do that privately. So this is coming more and more. Probably a most recent use case where such projects are becoming more adopted in wider industries is the Italian banking network. So 95% of the Italian banking network now uses Corda to reconcile differences between them. So very much production ready solution and pretty much the best use case for Corda around the privacy and security angle. So if we move to the next slide, please. I'll tell you just a little bit about the venture development program ourselves and what we do. And this is just a very brief diagram really to visualize it. And effectively, wherever you are on your startup journey, we're there to help. So we're a continuous program. We don't put anybody into a specific bucket or a specific list of things or activities you need to do. If you're at the very early stage and you're ideating on your idea, we help you to validate that idea and speak to customers to figure out whose problem are you really solving. Will people pay for that problem? How much will they pay? Can you turn that into a viable business model and not just a production ready technical solution? So once that stage is passed, then we help with the actual MVP. So how do you get production ready fast? What does your architecture look like? How will that work into banks? And then moving on to the next space, looking at getting customers. So are they banks? Are they insurers? Are they media companies? Are they consumer beverages companies? Whatever they may be, how do you make that connection? How do you pass the InfoSec? How do you pass the security checks? How do you pass all of the checks that the enterprises will need to do on this, not just your technology, but your business model, and get to that? And then finally, the next stage is, of course, to continue your growth journey with fundraising and the connections within our VC network. Along that, we also have our partnerships with accelerator incubators, which we speak to. So if that helps as well, depending on your use case. So move on to the final slide, please, Iryna. And this is really a summary. So this is what the R3 Venture Development Program is. And as I said, we are the gateway into the ecosystem of R3. We help with that, getting you access into that ecosystem of institutions, enterprises, and potential customers. We provide actionable content, which could be coming from insight pieces. And on the concluding slide, I'll share with an example of some of those. And access to mentors, whether they be industry experts or enterprise sales leaders, anybody who helps depending on what your use case is and where your journey is. We provide curated capital matchmaking, so with investor networks, with startup and angel investors, and other projects which are with corporate VCs, which are obviously looking for both a platform function and usability, and in terms of return on investment. And of course, finally, customers, really, that's the power of the R3 ecosystem. The idea is that these production grade ready solutions can interact with each other, and this is what we help to facilitate. So if we just wrap it up on the last slide, please. This is some of the content we've recently produced, which is helping startups navigate these long enterprise sales cycles. We did a piece around COVID, and also a piece around enterprise onboarding and procurement process. So those are my contact details below. If any of that's helpful in your startup journey, please do reach out. Enjoy the rest of Paris Blockchain. Any questions, we are here, and I'll pass it on to Iryna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, David. It was great. So welcome to the second part of the talk, which is a Corda for developers in 15 minutes. And I'm Iryna, will be presenting today with Anthony. So I will talk more about kind of technical implementations of Corda, how we achieved privacy, how we achieved interoperability, how we actually done it, and how developers can quickly start developing and using Corda. So please, if you have any questions while I'm talking, do drop a question on the chat and we will answer it immediately. So Corda is a blockchain platform for business, and this is a quick overview for people who are very new to Corda and want to understand more how Corda works. So what this presentation covers, so David already covered that Corda is a private blockchain, and I will just quickly go under the hood of the network. We'll explain very high level how it works, what it consists of. So it's like nodes and node trees. We'll talk about Corda applications known as Cordapps. So that's you and me as users of Corda write and run applications in Corda. Then I will go to a very quick overview of Corda components. So usually when we use Corda, we share facts with someone else about the transactions, and this is known as a state on Corda. And we write our programs, like our business logic, or like workflow, in the flow. And so also there is a ability to list all the rules, like legally agreed set of rules in a contract. Contracts are optional. They're only needs when you want to store state on a ledger. So let's begin. Let's start with the Corda network. So it's useful to think of a Corda network as a fully connected graph, where all nodes here, it's like A, B, and C, are actual Corda nodes. And each node represents an individual or organization, but typically it represents a legal identity. And each run Corda software, like those Corda apps, on their nodes. And the edges here, the edges between nodes represents a potential for those nodes to communicate between each other. So all of the nodes in the network have a potential to communicate with other nodes. So as long as you can see other node, you can message to it. You always should know the destination of a message and send it directly. And all communications between nodes is point-to-point. This means that data is shared on need-to-know basis. So this is how we achieve privacy by design, that nodes distribute data between each other on need-to-know basis. However, if required, then data can be broadcasted to multiple parties. But this is not a default way of sharing data on Corda. And this is a crucial point of Corda being different from other DLTs, like distributed ledger technology, that uses the global broadcast and gossip network to propagate the data around the network, whereas the Corda uses point-to-point messaging. And also want to stress out that in Corda, there is no single store of data, central store of data. So instead, each node maintains its own database, ledger, distributed ledger, of those facts that it's aware of. So the facts that nodes knows about are those that these nodes have been involved with. For example, if there are nodes representing Alice and Bob, A and B, on the network, and Alice loans Bob some money, for example, like £10, both Alice and Bob will store identical record, which is a state of these facts about the loan on their ledger. So Alice has a ledger on her vault, and Bob has ledger on his vault, and both of them have the same identical information. So I see is what you see, so they're both identical. And this is like notary pool means you can have multiple notary nodes, or you can have just one single node. So this is how the network, Corda network, is structured. Let's talk more about nodes and notary. So Corda node, so we have the same network, you see, and now we look at the only nodes. So here like A, B, and C are nodes. And Corda node run within a Java virtual machine. And this is a mechanism for nodes to discover each other, which is a list of all nodes on the network. So when node C has joined the network, he received this list of nodes on the network with whom he can communicate. He can communicate to all of them or to one of them. All of the benefits of DLT properties are made simple by abstracting away details. So distributed systems, cryptography, and data management, disaster recovery are completely hidden away from users. So it's very easy to use, very simple. And there is also a service hub, like over here. API allows interaction to core DLT functionality on the node. So I want to stress out that nodes abstract away the complexity of updating the ledger. So everything is very simple, just a couple of lines of code, very easy to use. So next is Notary. So we already saw this Notary on our previous slides. So Notary, the main kind of functionality of Notary clusters is prevent double spends. One obvious question is, if data is only distributed on the network on a need-to-know basis, how do we prevent double spends? So how do we prevent that some node transferring some digital asset to one node, to one party, and then turning around and also transferring it to another party? So in Corda, we prevent double spends using Notary pools. And I want to stress out that Notary is not storing any of information assets of the participants. It doesn't store this data there. It just stores some hashes, some traces, but no any important information is not stored there. So Notary clusters are also time-stamping authorities. So if, for example, a transaction includes a timed window, it can only be notarized using that window, and Notary checks it. And Notary clusters also validate transactions. So to make sure when there is two transaction between Alice and Bob, in the beginning they just message to each other without using Notary, but then when Bob asks Alice, hey, can you lend me £10? But then when they decide on the transaction, when they decide on state, and they decide to make this this transaction, then they go to Notary to validate it. And we have also a strong pluggable consensus. Since users operate under the set of trust assumptions, we have different algorithms for that as well. So this is how the Corda network works. So I just want to repeat again, the Corda network operates on a need-to-know basis, on peer-to-peer. So only nodes who need to know about these transactions receive information about it. It's not broadcasted by default. By default, you need to specify the address of the node, and Notary prevents double spends, and also because we use these Notary transactions happening very fast. So this is how we achieve speed and privacy and security. So next, let's see when we build on Corda, on our node. So before we talked about Corda network. Now we are inside one of those nodes, and we build on this Corda apps, right? So, but what is a Corda app? Corda stands for Corda's decentralized application. And if some may ask, what is decentralized application? And decentralized applications is application that runs on distributed computing system. So it's also sometimes referred as a smart contract, another blockchain such as Ethereum, for example. But so if you go back to Corda are simply binary jars that are stored inside Corda nodes, and each node carry multiple Corda apps. For example, on this example, you see that different nodes have different Corda apps. And in real life example, you can have supply chain Corda app running on your node, and you have insurance Corda app running on the same time on the same node. So it's all possible. So we decided we are on the node, we know what's Corda, we want to write application. So we need to learn about kind of the main components, key components, foundations of Corda. So the main foundations of Corda is a flow, state, and a contract. So in the flow, as already mentioned before, it's a place where we execute our business logic. All calculations, verifications, signing, data writing will all get executed in the flow. Flow allows you to build transactions, message to parties. For example, on our example with the Alice and Bob, in the beginning, when Bob wanted to borrow £10 from Alice, he will just message to Alice node. Later, they want to build transaction. This will be the same like on the flow. It's possible to have like several flows. So state is objects on Corda that are stored on the ledger, and they can get consumed, updated, and stored. So, for example, in the beginning, the first state that Alice and Bob stored will be that Alice lended Bob £10. This will be the first state. Later, when Bob wants to repay, for example, £3 back to Alice, he will get another state saying that he repaid £3 and now he owes Alice £7. And lastly is like contracts that verifies transactions. It's agreed upon rules that all users can change the state or fact that can be involved over time. So let's look at every of these components, flow, state, and contract, a little bit into more detail. So flow is the entry point for your Corda. Think of it as a main function in Java or C++, but you can have many of them. For example, with Alice and Bob example, in the beginning, they will have Bob will have one flow to send a message to Alice, and then, for example, will be another flow to decide on the transaction and to build transaction. So, and those steps in the flow reflects business logic of your Corda. So, and since we're on the network, it usually communicates with other nodes on the network. And in the flow, you can say when to communicate, or what you want to communicate, like your state, and who to communicate with. So you have to specify address where this state is going. It can it's very, very important for your like privacy. Also, so developers can quickly accomplish tasks through extensible like flow libraries that is available, which perform standard tasks with very few lines of code. It's like super efficient, very, very simple to use. So next we'll go and learn about what the state is. So we already know that typical use case for Corda is to allow different organizations to message each other and transact with each other. This is essentially a shared fact between two or more nodes or one node, even one node. So a piece of data that doesn't exist in a central repository, but instead exists in all nodes that participate in this event. So, and in Corda, this is shared fact. This shared fact called the state. And when you want to store, like share some information on a ledger, you can only store state. This is only available in how you can do. You need to store like states on the ledger, and this state. If you communicate with other parties, if Bob wants to communicate with Alice, they both will have the same state on their ledger. So contract. Every time you write a state on the vault, you need a contract. And the contract consists of a set of rules that take each transaction. It's checking about number of states that came in and came out. If I go back to Alice and Bob, in the beginning, the first state was Alice lends Bob £10. This was the first transaction state. When later Bob pays back £3, it will be second state. It will be created as a so that state will be updated where Alice lends £10. The new state will be Bob owns to Alice £7 and £3 he repaid. So it's all checked in the contract. It's just like very simple set of rules. You can put like you can check attachments, function calls, number of states, amount of money that came in and out. So it's just kind of like something that all parties should agree on. So that's it. We just like learn quickly about Corda network. We went through, we learned how nodes communicate on the network between each other. That is peer-to-peer. That's why it's very secure, and privacy is achieved by also by this like peer-to-peer communication. Speed is achieved by using notary to validate the transactions, and we learn the key foundations, how to write Corda, how to write a decentralized application on Corda. And this is very simple. So thank you so much for listening to us today. And please, if you have any more questions, put them please in chat and we will answer. Thank you.
So definitely, I've put some resources, and so has Edgar's, in terms of where you can get started and what kind of developer resources you have access to. Just before we sort of like attack any of these questions, I'd like to also just reiterate from the developer standpoint what some of the value propositions are with getting started with Corda. So based on what Iryna was explaining, the fact that we have basically created taken business problems and business workflows and being able to segment them into specific sort of components of a Corda app. So basically the flow is modeling your business processes or your transactional agreements, every stage of it, whether that's like querying an internal database to get client information, etc. And then maybe doing some calculations or some business intermediary steps. At that point, you can build transactions and create proposals, and then interact seamlessly with other counterparties on the network. So we have the flow, which is able to represent those business processes. And then we have, separate to that, the actual representation of your shared fact, whether that be like a record of an agreement, an IOU, a digital asset, etc. You can encapsulate that into a Corda state. That state can be basically mapped to your own internal databases with custom schemas, or it can be defaulted to a representation chosen by the platform. So it's very quick. And finally, with that contract, that's the component which is able to put together and pull together your agreements, like basically the constraints that you and all of your consortium or your counterparties who will be utilizing this application can rapidly verify whether the state transition is valid. So if I propose a transaction to a counterparty to basically transition a state from one position in supply chain to the next of that flow, then that receiving party of that transaction can instantly verify whether this is following all of the agreed upon regulations, all of the agreed upon transactional processes that we have put together. So this sort of like modeling provides a lot of discourse between the developers and also the business stakeholders, allowing you to get your time to value down and allow you to get your solutions up really, really quickly. Additionally, it makes it very easy for the developers to rapidly create solutions because they can take a specification. We have something called a Corda design language, which is allowed to, it's basically a modeling language where you can give it to a developer build that Corda app for you very, very quickly. And so it just rapidly streamlines things. Everything's on JVM, so you probably already have development teams that are proficient in Java or Kotlin, and we have a lot of industry kind of like going towards Corda because of how easy it is to get started.
Thank you so much, Anthony. So is there any questions? I don't see.
Okay, we don't have any questions yet. I would encourage everybody beyond the event to also reach out. Our team, Developer Relations, is working seamlessly and interacting with David and venture development. So we work hand in hand to get startups off the ground very, very quickly. So basically, like David was talking about, through ideation, MVP, and basically testing your market solutions. Developer Relations is working hand in hand each process there to make developers are able to understand how the solution fits into the technical implementation of Corda, providing resources along the way. And you'll find that with that understanding comes a lot of business value, not just in the technical implementation, but also in the pitch and being able to communicate that solution to investors and those out in industry.
Thank you very much, Anthony. We have had one question there. Can Corda help businesses in difficult situation during coronavirus? Well, ultimately, to be honest with you, the blockchain is just a technology, really. Ultimately, where can it help is the implementation of it, and this is where R3 and the ecosystem comes in. Now, to answer that question, we in fact specifically held a Corda call to action challenge around the time of late March, early April, where we brought together all of these Corda startups that said, right, what solutions around COVID have you got? Many of these were working on supply chain for various industries, which were mentioned here before, and they immediately pivoted their business model to start tracking things within the healthcare space, which were obviously needed. I mean, things like just the basics of toilet paper, right up to actually the actual medical supplies towards the healthcare systems were needed. Many of these business models pivoted towards that. And Corda is a fantastic use case for such industries and for such that, because of the obviously the privacy angle of this, especially within the healthcare space. But similarly, another, maybe less obvious case, because we talk about this as being an enterprise blockchain startup, but many startups also pivoted their Corda solutions around small and medium-sized enterprises, setting up a network around that. Obviously, some of the businesses that were most impacted around this were some of these small and medium-sized enterprises, shouldn't have the support network of the larger companies. And many Corda solutions used their solutions which were currently aimed towards trade finance, but again interacting with parties, to build networks around micro traders to be able to allow them to transact in a more efficient and effective manner, to be able to still keep going and move their businesses digitally during the lockdown. So yeah, we've definitely had parts of this. And to add as well to what Anthony was saying, that very much how we start our solution, how Corda was built, is we go off legal prose. So there is no legal contracts or anything built into the code. We very much work off business use cases in the real world, and the code simply references to that. So it's really applicable to every use case where it is, and it's reason why so many businesses use this.
So we have another question also. Can you explain more your bootcamp activities, please? And in answering this question, I'm actually going to sort of trail on and continue on with the healthcare example really quickly to articulate in real tangible representation how you can take solutions and work through the developer resources like the bootcamp. So as David was mentioning, healthcare is a big vertical, and we have active collaborations and research into this space. Problems that would specifically address some of the needs of COVID are things that are common to the healthcare vertical, such as electronic health records, privacy, handling of privacy between different counterparties, consortiums of healthcare institutions that might need to transact on either patient data or on something like a scientific data on the life cycle of a testing trial, or on the release of a vaccine, etc. So to wrap this into how it relates to boot camps and the things that we're providing right now, you can basically take each one of our boot camps, which are available through YouTube. You can go to the Corda YouTube channel, or you can, we have regularly occurring live sessions. The first one would be like a quick start or a 101 boot camp, which would get the idea of modeling problems into a Corda app. So you could take something like a contract flow and state and represent an electronic health record with that state. And that'll get you sort of like closer to your MVP or your POC stage. Then we have, leading on further to more advanced, we have the tokens SDK, which allows you to streamline transfer of value through APIs, which will basically eliminate a lot of the coding and rapidly get your solution up. Now, when I say like transfer of value, value doesn't necessarily mean something monetary or a digital asset per se. It can be a valuable fact, such as that electronic health record, such as the phase of a particular trial. So you can basically migrate your initial solution, which you learned in our beginners bootcamp, and then add tokens to it to rapidly streamline the movement of that record throughout a Corda app. Then we also have accounts leading after that, and accounts is allowing additional participation in Corda networks by having sub-entities of your initial like onboarded KYC network identity. So think of it in this case, I might have Pfizer or something as a node on a Corda network, and Pfizer might be working with some subsidiaries doing supply of the drug materials or doing like testing laboratory. Can take their Corda app solution and integrate accounts to have all those subsidiaries basically represented through transactions. So this is like an ABC progression through the developer journey, which can basically handle any use case. Are there any more questions? So I see one question here, which is the core of Corda Network, but about the very large pieces of business code, specifically developed in particular use cases. Frederick, could you sort of clarify where you're angling with that question? I'm just not sure how to interpret it. Okay, so we'll just interpret it some way. I guess one way to interpret it is wondering about business logic and how use cases might translate into large pieces of business code or logic. Basically, on the network level, when you have a Corda app that you've shared between different counterparties, you are kind of planning and agreeing on the functionality of the Corda app pre-deployment in terms of like general business rules. So that can be very succinct, and actually from an implementation standpoint, you want that to be very succinct because of network overhead and because you want to allow corporations or entities to have extra constraints that are specific to them. So you want to keep the minimal agreed upon like absolutes. In something like a fiat representation token economy, etc., you might want to have basic things such as maximum withdrawals or maximum limits on a transaction that has a monetary value or whatever. So these are things that would be universal to all the participants with this Corda app. But beyond this, we leave things up to the individual actors. So basically any transaction has to conform to these set global, universally agreed upon things in the contract. But then when you're actually doing a transaction proposal and acceptance, the accepting party has something called a responder flow. And in that responder flow, there's extra logic that you can call in a check transaction function, which will allow you to extend on the basic constraint criteria and add your own custom things. So maybe like the global limit on a particular transaction could be like 6 figures or like something like that. But my corporation wants to, for liquidity reasons, kind of like cap that at a lower value. So I can put in additional extended constraints implemented on an individual basis. So that keeps like sort of like the logic of the Corda app very succinct for those that want to participate, but you can extend it as far as you want on an individual level.
We have a question there about the latest Corda release, but I think we're even a higher version of 4.6 there. So perhaps Anthony and Iryna can give us a bit more about the latest releases of Corda.
Right. So there's a lot on with the latest releases. We had some announcements at CordaCon, so I encourage everybody to go back to CordaCon as well and check the recordings from there, because we have some big changes coming in the upcoming quarters. In terms of like 4.6, we've added some functionality such as the ability to identify flows, so you're able to actually track and recover stages or steps within your flows. For those that are new to Corda, this might seem a little bit like Greek language or whatever, but you'll see that it becomes very powerful. The great thing also about the latest releases is not the migration process is quite seamless. So we have very very streamlined and favorable upgrading cycles. And you'll notice that that's one of the reasons that we're also very appealing for industry and regulated markets, is that we are able to manage quarterly releases and put in succinct value at every stage, which is representative of the business needs that have occurred through our clientele, through our developer feedback loops, etc. So 4.6, you'll see a lot of features, and I'll post in some blogs on how you can utilize and understand the new basically the new set of abilities and capabilities. We also have a more streamlined migration process that was introduced. So when you're kind of transitioning, say, from open source to enterprise. But I encourage everybody to take a look at what the links that I'll post, and also take a look at enterprise as well, in terms of reaching functionality that will help you grow and have your business really scalable from the get-go. But again, 2 versions, and David and venture development can articulate the differences based on your specific needs.
Yeah, and the very important points there just brought up, and really this brings about why we did this panel session together. R3, the ecosystem is getting wider and wider. So beyond the traditional financial use cases where we started as a consortium, we've moved obviously to insurance, and we dominate that space there. Now trade finance, healthcare is becoming now a big vertical. And equally in terms of the customer sizes, we've extended that ecosystem into the earliest stage blockchain startup projects. So we're very aware that a lot of these projects start with some great ideas and start building out technology. We really want to help them with that. So the developer experience, to try to make your product build out, to get you to MVP, to get you production ready as fast as possible, as effectively as possible, with as best possible experience. And likewise, for you to not make those early startup mistakes when you begin to actually not just build an MVP, but you build a minimum viable business model. And we try to help validate that with our customer ecosystem. So really we're extending our ecosystem, and Corda is at the heart of that. So really happy to help support your journey, whichever stage you're at.
Okay, let's see if we can pick up a few more questions. I posted in some links, CordaCon 4.6 release notes and 4.7 beta link. Is there a way to do RPC interactions with Corda without having in the server Gradle dependencies? Okay, so for RPC, for those that are new to Corda, basically you have to, after you deploy your Corda app, you have to have an ability to interact in real time with that node and basically kick off flows and initiate operations. So Corda does this through RPC. Every node will have an RPC server up, and then it's up to the Corda app developer or the one managing that node to set up something like a front end with an RPC client and REST endpoints to interact. So the question is there a way to do RPC interactions with Corda without having Quasar utils in the server Gradle dependencies? Okay, for this question, I'm actually going to have to look this one up and get back to you, Vlad, on whether this can be done. Generally, once you have your Corda app running, you can just basically decouple to do with the RPC client. You can sort of just be port, but I want to double check on that dependencies and get back to you there. So Pierre, you asked about best practices for a custom Ethereum module. Can you kind of like articulate what you're envisioning with this, and we can try to address it? Are you talking about interoperability? Okay, I'll go with the use case talking about interop. So Corda is completely capable of interoperability, and basically we've had some projects in the past which have interfaced with, say, like with Ripple and XRP, and a lot of clients have actually implemented their own solutions for interop. We don't have anything out of the box that would directly allow you to plug in at the moment, but we do have everything in place for you to create very quickly your own solutions. So if you wanted to go into Stellar, that's definitely possible from a technical implementation standpoint. We will be sort of like providing more and more tooling as the time goes on in terms of like how you can bootstrap these things and get things going quick. But it's definitely possible. And also look up on the notes for Corda 5.0. So we've released some information on what sort of feature sets that will entail, and Dave Hudson gave a talk at CordaCon. There's something called consensus states as well, which can really work towards interoperability solutions. So that's something to look forward to and definitely research on. We're getting a lot of questions now. So one of them is on recruiting remote devs. So that's something that we're always actively recruiting in general. Corda, basically as a company, R3, there's so much going on in the space. We have so much demand in terms of solutions to be provided and to help bring to market. And we have so many different roles as a growing company. So I can tell you that go to r3.com and you'll see sort of like our job descriptions and ways that you can apply. Okay. So Pierre asked another question: how can I specify and make flow to find successfully my file containing the sender's encrypted wallet? Corda is a little bit different than I think I don't know if you're talking about interoperability still here, but for the general public, Corda is different in the sense that we don't have wallets per se in the Corda ecosystem. They're just not needed from that sense based on the enterprise demands and the types of problems that are being solved and really leveraging Corda as a platform. Every particular onboarded entity or organization goes through KYC and has a real world tied legally binding identity before being issued admittance onto a Corda network. And all of the transactions and all of the states, whether they're containing value or containing arbitrary records or shared facts, those are held on that node's persistent store or vault. So that's kind of analogous to a wallet. If you're talking about individual actors subordinate to that particular node, like I was talking about accounts before, having like clients of a particular node issue and transact on the Corda network, their vault is logically segregated on the node. So it's a part of the node store, and it can basically at the application layer can be basically delegated to a particular sub-identity. Okay, we also have a question about release. When do we expect the final version of Corda to be ready? I'm guessing you're talking about 5.0. So keep following r3.com, go there and get the latest updates. I have at hand a specific date that I can give out right now, but it's going to be awesome, and it's coming out pretty soon. In the meantime, the current version of Corda is definitely something you can get started with, because every subsequent release obviously builds on the previous, and we try to make the migration from one to the next as smooth and sort of like headache free as possible. So I definitely wouldn't say wait for the next release to begin investigating and begin learning and engaging with venture dev or with developer relations. You can get started right now, and we'll help you through all of the pain points that you might encounter.
Yeah, and I'll just add quickly to that, there won't be a final version, so to speak. It will be 5, because we'll always continuously improve this product with our customers. So can you see, it will always be a living product. And, you know, the first version is obviously very different to where we are now. But as the ecosystem, as customers and use cases develop, and the need and how people are interacting with Corda and what's valuable for them, we'll keep adapting the product to suit.
To join the Slack, somebody asked, what do we need to join your Slack? All you need is just really the love of distributed ledger technology. Go to slack.corda.net, and anybody can join. We welcome everyone in the Corda community, whether you're a stakeholder, somebody just investigating, or you're a developer who's new, or maybe you have some experience. You can join slack.corda.net, and we have a humongous community that's very supportive and willing to help you. Oh, why do we need to join your Slack? I think I kind of encapsulated it there. So what's happening in Slack is we have announcements on all of our different events. We have a lot of technical discussions, no matter what aspect of development you're interested in, whether that's something like security, whether it's something like trusted execution environments, or what's going on with Corda Conclave, or if it's just general Corda apps or specific business verticals. If you join slack.corda.net, there's sort of there's a welcoming community for any sort of interest. And so that's why we really appreciate it, and we really encourage all developers to join. David, you could speak a little bit about business partners. Boris was asking about what are your business partners?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it links into this. So we also have within the venture development community a founder Slack channel, which is almost parallel to the developers community one, but focused more on founders. And then within that, subgroups within CTOs as well. Then so really to add another element to why we have the founder Slack is it's really a community of engagement around Corda, and that. To answer the other question about the next version of Corda, this is how these improvements come about, because we understand what helps developers more. How does the product work to help facilitate these use cases? And that's how the ecosystem grows. Now, Julie's there put a link there to see some of our partners and how we do that. That's a very, very good resource. And you'll see there a subsection of our 350 plus partners within the ecosystem. And really within venture development, obviously targeted to the more startup projects within the actual R3 official partnership and business partners network, which are more to the enterprise. We really work with all manner of projects. So whether they be tech deployment, whether that be cloud infrastructure, whether that be the dev implementation partners, or whether they be actual consortia, which need to that, really everything which fits into the R3 ecosystem is available. It depends on what customers need, what business cases are useful for them. As the technical side of the presentation said to you, that Corda apps are specifically built to interoperate, but how they do that and why they would do that is a function of business case and demand and business models. So really the network, the public Corda network certainly, but the entire ecosystem is set up for that interoperability. So there's partners, and someone mentioned about European development and Russia in all countries globally. So that's not a limiting factor at all. So we've got a question about how do we start working with incubators. So how we work with incubators is a very much the same thing. It's a partnership project. So if an early stage blockchain startup is beginning, we would help them with whatever they need. So whether the ideation, the validation phase, whether they need help with building out their product with the MVP, with actually figuring out where their architecture should be, with what our customers and ecosystem are saying about this, like who's willing to pay for this, how much are they willing to pay for this, why should you build this? And incubators, of course, support that because they have their own network. They have, again, their ecosystem of mentorships, they have content, they have resources. So we have partnerships with many of the relevant incubators, which we found that have similar DLT projects, and we're growing. So I think our list probably is around, well, it's certainly over 20 to 30 within the EMEA region, and continues to grow. So really the accelerator, incubators and other partnerships are a key part of our program because that helps support startup growth and development. And they're very much akin to the similar partners that we have in the R3 ecosystem. They're just another subset of that, but of course more needed by the early stage blockchain products.
I guess another thing that I'll mention, which is sort of related to this topic of collaboration, working with incubators, etc., is I want to basically propose to everybody in the audience that, I mean, one of the value propositions of distributed ledger technology in general is that it facilitates and enhances, streamlines transfer of value between counterparties. And that sort of like mentality, I think, really extends beyond the platform itself to the Corda community in general. So what I like to say is that wherever you are in the journey, never feel like you're stuck. We always want to keep the wheels greased. We always want to keep you moving forward. So this is extending to all of the internal services that we provide for business stakeholders as well as developers. We've got venture development. We've got developer relations who are here to help you learn and help you grow in your journey as a developer on the platform. But once you're kind of moving a little bit past that beginning point, we also have a slew of internal teams which are working to get you to production. So at any time that you feel I need a code review, I need to know where this is going, we also provide professional services, which will basically allow you to engage with core developers and ones that are expert in your particular vertical, have experience going all the way to the finish line with whatever solution you're looking for. So there's always this way to extend your capabilities and be able to leverage the resources of R3 as a company and the community of Corda in general. Additionally, we'll be rolling out managed services shortly too. So that'll also basically bootstrap you right to where you need to be. Okay, we'll probably be running out of time soon, so I encourage anybody to fire in their last questions. If you don't get a chance to submit your question here and get an answer on air, definitely check out one of our communities. Go to slack.corda.net, or if you have a technical question, you can post under the Corda tag at Stack Overflow, and we'll have people look at that and address things quickly as possible. Okay, well, it's been an amazing pleasure to be here, and I welcome everybody to the Corda family. Reach out to any of us, venture development, developer relations, and yeah, hope to see everybody in production.
Thank you so much.
Great to see you. Enjoy the rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.